You know that feeling when the clock strikes midnight, 1 a.m., 2 a.m., and you're still awake, scrolling aimlessly through your phone, watching just one more video, reading just one more article, deliberately putting off turning off the lights and closing your eyes. It's not classic insomnia because you could sleep if you wanted to, but something inside you resists, procrastinates, pushes sleep away as if avoiding an inevitable encounter with yourself. Maybe you even feel the fatigue weighing down your eyelids, your body begging for rest, but still, you stay there, navigating the darkness, filling the silence of the night with anything to keep your mind occupied. During the day, you function on autopilot, you meet your obligations, you interact with people, you wear that social mask perfectly adjusted. But when night falls and the world around you drifts off to sleep, you finally have that space of solitude that is both liberating and terrifying. It's in these moments, when there's nothing external demanding your attention, that the questions begin to whisper in the darkness. What am I doing with my life? Where is all this heading? Why do I wake up every day to repeat the same meaningless routine? And then you grab your phone again, put on another episode of some random series, anything to silence those existential voices that echo louder in the stillness of the early morning. You might even laugh at yourself, make jokes about being a night owl, about being more productive at night, but deep down, you know something more profound is happening, a subtle but persistent escape from something you can't quite name. And here's what's truly unsettling. Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist who survived Auschwitz and founded logotherapy, discovered something crucial about this self-sabotaging sleep behavior that goes far beyond simple time management or lack of discipline. Through decades of working with patients exhibiting seemingly inexplicable self-destructive patterns, Frankl identified a deep psychological dynamic he called the existential void, and it manifests in surprisingly specific ways in everyday life, including how we handle sleep and nighttime solitude. What Frankl realized is that when a person systematically postpones sleep, especially when there are no urgent practical reasons, they are often running from an unavoidable encounter with themselves, a confrontation with the noetic dimension of their existence that demands answers about meaning and purpose. And the most transformative discovery of all is that this escape isn't a sign of weakness or laziness, but rather a symptom of something much deeper that can be understood and transformed when we grasp the true nature of the human search for meaning. Frankl's observation of the existential void began long before his experience in the concentration camps, back in his clinical practice in Vienna in the 1930s, when he noticed an intriguing pattern among his patients. Many came to him with symptoms that traditional Freudian psychoanalysis couldn't adequately explain. People who had seemingly successful lives, functional relationships, financial security, yet felt a deep, inexplicable angst that manifested in seemingly trivial ways, including erratic sleep patterns and an inability to simply stop and rest. Frankl realized these individuals weren't suffering from Freudian neuroses caused by repressed sexual conflicts or childhood traumas, but from what he termed neugenic neuroses, disturbances originating in the spiritual or noetic dimension of human existence, a lack of meaning and purpose. The word noetic comes from the Greek nous, meaning mind or spirit, and Frankl used it to specifically designate the human dimension that seeks meaning, that asks why and to what end about existence, that isn't satisfied with mere pleasure or power, but yearns for something that transcends the ego itself. What Frankl observed is that in modern society, especially after the decline of traditional religious and community structures that offered ready-made meanings, more and more people were experiencing what he called the existential void, a sense of futility and purposelessness that couldn't be filled by entertainment, consumption, sex, or external achievements. And this is where the issue of sleep enters in a fascinating way. Night, especially those quiet hours when the world sleeps, is when this existential void becomes most palpable, when the day's distractions cease and one is left alone with themselves, confronted by the big questions they've been avoiding through constant busyness. Frankl developed this understanding even more deeply during his years in Auschwitz, Dachau, and other Nazi concentration camps between 1942 and 1945. There, stripped of absolutely everything that normally defines human identity, his profession, his family, his possessions, his bodily dignity, Frankl observed something extraordinary. Some prisoners could maintain an inner spark of humanity and purpose, even in the most degrading conditions imaginable, while others, physically stronger, crumbled quickly and lost the will to live. The difference, Frankl realized, wasn't in the external circumstances, which were equally horrific for everyone, but in the capacity to find or create meaning, even in that absurd situation. He noticed that prisoners who had something waiting for them in the future, an unfinished task, a loved one who still needed them, our work that still needed to be completed, tended to survive longer and with greater inner dignity than those who saw only a void of meaning. And here lies the crucial paradox Frankl discovered. The meaning of life cannot be given or artificially invented. It must be discovered in the concrete reality of each situation. And this discovery requires a person to stop running from themselves and honestly confront the fundamental questions about their existence. In the concentration camp, there was no escape from this confrontation. There was no entertainment, no distractions, only you and your naked consciousness facing the absurd and the suffering. But in comfortable modern life, we have infinite ways to avoid this encounter with ourselves, and sleep procrastination is one of the most subtle and socially accepted. When you put off going to sleep for no real practical reason, when you stay up scrolling through endless social media feeds, watching content you don't even really want to watch, or just wandering around the house aimlessly, you're unconsciously avoiding that moment of stillness where the big existential questions emerge. Frankl explained that humans possess a unique capacity among all animals, self-distancing. This means the ability to observe oneself, to ask questions about one's own existence, to reflect on the meaning of life. This capacity is both our greatest gift and our greatest source of anguish, because it forces us to confront questions that don't have easy or ready-made answers. A dog doesn't wonder if its life has meaning, it simply lives by its instincts. But humans, especially in modernity, where ready-made answers provided by unquestionable religious or community traditions are no longer available, need to construct their own meaning. This process requires introspection, silence, and confronting uncomfortable truths about who we are and what we're doing with our one life. Nighttime, when the obligations and distractions of the day cease, is naturally the time when this noetic dimension of existence becomes more present, when consciousness turns inward and begins to ask the difficult questions. And for many people, especially those living lives disconnected from a clear purpose, this encounter is so uncomfortable that they develop unconscious avoidance strategies. The primary one is filling the nighttime hours with constant stimulation to keep the mind superficially occupied. What's interesting is that Frankl clearly distinguished between what he called the will to meaning, our primary and authentic human motivation, and the will to pleasure or the will to power, which are secondary motivations that often appear as substitutes when the search for meaning is frustrated. Freud had proposed that the will to pleasure, especially sexual pleasure, was the fundamental driving force of human beings. Adler, another important psychoanalyst, had proposed the will to power as an alternative. But Frankl, drawing on both his clinical experience and his observations in concentration camps, argued that neither pleasure nor power are primary motivations. In fact, when a person cannot find genuine meaning in their life, they try to compensate by seeking intense pleasures or by pursuing power and domination. This is a crucial distinction for understanding the pattern of delaying sleep. When you stay up browsing social media, consuming superficial entertainment, you're seeking small doses of immediate pleasure, the dopamine hit from each new stimulus, as a way to fill the void left by the absence of deeper meaning. But pleasure, Frankl insisted, is a side effect of living a meaningful life, not a goal in itself. The more you pursue pleasure directly, the more it eludes you, because you're trying to fill with external stimuli what can only be satisfied through genuine engagement with tasks and relationships that transcend the ego. And here's the vicious cycle. The more you delay sleep by chasing these superficial little pleasures, the more tired you become the next day, less capable of engaging deeply with meaningful activities, the emptier you feel, and therefore the more you need to resort to superficial stimuli again the following night. And now I want to take a pause and really talk to you. I know many of you watching this video recognize this pattern in your own lives, this mysterious resistance to simply turning off the lights and sleeping when you know you should. So tell me in the comments below, have you ever felt like you stay up late not out of real necessity, but because you're afraid of the silence and the questions that arise when everything stops? If so, just write, "I run from the nighttime silence," nothing more. And know that by doing so, you're helping others in the comments feel less alone. It's often liberating just to see that others go through the exact same thing and are on this same journey of seeking meaning. Let's create a community of courage and authenticity here. Your experience matters, and when you share it here, you not only validate your own experience, but show dozens of others that they're not alone in this silent struggle against emptiness. Frankl developed specific therapeutic techniques based on his understanding of existential emptiness. and two of them are particularly relevant for understanding and transforming the pattern of delaying sleep. The first is paradoxical intention, where instead of fighting directly against a neurotic symptom, you deliberately intensify or embrace that symptom, which paradoxically removes its power over you. For example, Frankl treated a patient with severe insomnia who was desperately trying to force sleep, which only created more anxiety and more insomnia. Frankl instructed the patient to do the exact opposite. Try to stay awake as long as possible. Deliberately resist sleep. The paradoxical result was that the patient, by stopping the fight against the symptom, relaxed and was able to sleep naturally. But here's the crucial point that goes beyond this specific technique. The problem wasn't sleep itself, but the underlying anxiety and emptiness manifesting through the symptom of insomnia. Similarly, when you delay sleep by procrastinating, the real problem isn't poor time management, but the existential emptiness you're avoiding confronting. Paradoxical intention works because it removes the superficial layer of anxiety about the symptom, but the real healing only comes when you address the deeper issue of meaning. The second crucial technique is dereflection, where you stop focusing obsessively on yourself and redirect your attention to something or someone outside of yourself. Frankl realized that many neuroses are maintained and intensified by hyper-reflection, meaning overthinking about oneself, constantly monitoring internal states, worrying excessively about oneself. The cure comes through self-transcendence, stepping outside of oneself and dedicating oneself to a cause or person that has value independent of you. But how does this apply specifically to the habit of staying up late? Frankl would say that when you're scrolling through your phone at 3 in the morning, you're caught in a kind of empty hyper-reflection, constantly stimulating your mind with content that keeps you focused on yourself, your likes, your desires, your comparisons to others, but never truly transcending to something with genuine meaning. True dereflection would involve finding a task, a project, a commitment that is bigger than you, something that demands your energy and dedication, not because it will bring immediate pleasure, but because it has intrinsic value. Frankl told the story of an elderly patient who was deeply depressed after his wife's death. The man asked Frankl what to do with his unbearable suffering. Frankl, instead of giving direct advice, asked a question in return. What would have happened if you had died first and your wife had been widowed? The man replied that she would have suffered terribly. Then Frankl said, "You see, your suffering spared her that suffering, but now you have to pay for it by surviving and grieving." Suddenly the man's suffering gained meaning. It didn't disappear, but it was transformed into a sacrifice with purpose. The same logic applies to the emptiness you feel in the late night hours. It won't simply vanish because you decide to have discipline and go to bed early. It will only be transformed when you find something worth being well rested for, something that demands your best self, something that gives meaning to the sacrifice of giving up small, superficial pleasures in favor of a greater purpose. Frankl constantly emphasized that meaning cannot be given or invented. It needs to be discovered in the concrete reality of each individual life. There is no universal answer to the question of the meaning of life because the question itself is being asked incorrectly. Life doesn't ask you what its meaning is. Life asks you what you will do in response to the specific demands of your unique situation. Frankl used to compare this to a chess game. There's no single best move in chess in an abstract sense. There's only the best move for that specific board configuration at that specific moment. Similarly, there's no universal, abstract meaning that works for everyone in every situation. There's only the concrete meaning you can discover by looking honestly at the possibilities and responsibilities of your particular life, right now. And this is where the resistance to sleep connects deeply with the question of meaning. When you postpone going to sleep, you are also postponing waking up to the next day, and therefore postponing the confrontation with the responsibilities and possibilities of that new day. If you have no clarity on why it's worth waking up tomorrow, if you see nothing awaiting you that truly matters, then of course there's no motivation to take good care of your rest and prepare your body and mind to face that tomorrow. Procrastinating sleep is ultimately a way of procrastinating life itself. Frankl identified 3 main avenues through which humans can find meaning. And understanding these avenues offers a concrete path to transforming the pattern of delaying sleep. The first avenue is through creating something or accomplishing a deed, through creative or productive work that contributes something of value to the world. This doesn't necessarily mean grand historical achievements. It can be something as simple as planting a garden, writing poems that perhaps only you will read, teaching a skill to someone, building something with your hands. The crucial point is that you are putting something into the world that wouldn't exist without you. You are actively participating in creating value, not just passively consuming. When your life has this creative or productive element that matters to you, waking up in the morning takes on a clear purpose. There's something waiting for you, something only you can do. The second avenue is through experiencing something or encountering someone, through love, beauty, truth, genuine encounters with other people. Frankl emphasized that loving another person deeply, seeing that person's unique and irreplaceable essence, is one of the most meaning-generating experiences there is. But this also applies to experiencing nature, art, knowledge, anything that pulls us out of ourselves and connects us with something larger. Again, when your life includes deep relationships or experiences you genuinely value, you have clear reasons to take care of yourself, to be present, to not waste your energy on empty distractions. But the third avenue is perhaps the most profound, and certainly the most relevant for those struggling with existential emptiness, finding meaning through the attitude you adopt in the face of inevitable suffering. Frankl realized in Auschwitz that when all other sources of meaning are stripped away from you, when you can no longer create anything, when you can no longer experience beauty or love, there remains one last freedom that no one can take away: the freedom to choose your attitude toward what is happening. You can choose to maintain your inner dignity even when your outer dignity is destroyed. You can choose not to become what your oppressors want you to become. You can transform your suffering into a human achievement by enduring it in a way that honors your humanity. This is not a romantic or abstract idea. Frankl saw it happen concretely in the camps. He saw prisoners who shared their last piece of bread with others, who comforted companions even when they themselves were on the brink of death, who refused to steal or betray even under torture. These acts didn't change the external circumstances, but they completely transformed the inner meaning of those lives. And in modern life, even when your suffering isn't as extreme as that of a concentration camp, the same dynamic applies. You can always choose how to respond to what life is putting in front of you. If you're stuck in a job you hate but can't leave right now for practical reasons, you can still choose the attitude with which you do that job. You can transform it into a sacrifice with purpose, if it's supporting your family or saving for a future transition. If you're facing an illness, you can choose how to live with it in a way that preserves your humanity and perhaps even inspires others. The key is that meaning doesn't come from eliminating suffering, but from transforming it through the attitude you adopt. Frankl had a sharp critique of what he saw as the modern obsession with constant happiness and pleasure. He argued that the direct pursuit of happiness is self-defeating because happiness isn't something you can chase down and capture. Happiness is a byproduct of living a life dedicated to something that transcends the pursuit of happiness itself. He called this the self-transcending quality of human existence. You only reach your full potential when you stop focusing on self-fulfillment and start dedicating yourself to something or someone beyond yourself. This is why people who relentlessly chase pleasure and happiness often end up feeling empty and miserable, while those who devote themselves to causes, relationships, or work that matters to them typically report deeper levels of satisfaction and meaning, even when facing hardship. And here's the direct connection to the late-night scrolling habit. When you're endlessly scrolling social media feeds, watching random videos, consuming superficial content, you're directly and immediately seeking happiness and pleasure, trying to fill a void with external stimuli. But as Frankl would predict, this only intensifies the emptiness because you're not engaging with anything that truly matters. You're not dedicating yourself to anything that transcends your own ego. You're trapped in a cycle of hyper-reflection and pleasure-seeking that can never satisfy the deeper need for meaning. The liberation from this cycle doesn't come through sheer willpower to go to bed early, but through finding something worth being rested and present for. If these ideas are resonating with you, if you feel like you've finally found someone who understands this quest for genuine meaning, beyond superficial productivity hacks or cheap self-help, subscribe to this channel. Here, we weekly explore the thought of Frankl and other humanist philosophers who offer real answers to the existential void so many of us carry in silence. You don't have to walk this journey of self-discovery and meaning-making alone. Hit that subscribe button and become part of this community of people brave enough to question, seek, and grow. This is a safe space to explore these profound dimensions of human existence, away from the superficial noise that dominates much of the internet. Frankl also developed a profound understanding of what he termed the freedom of will, which differs from free will in the traditional philosophical sense. He wasn't interested in abstract debates about determinism versus freedom, but in something far more concrete and practical. Even when your circumstances are completely determined and you can't change them, you still retain the freedom to choose your inner attitude toward those circumstances. This freedom is uniquely human and inviolable. In the concentration camps, Frankl had no freedom over his body, his food, his external fate, but he retained freedom over his thoughts, his inner stance, the values he chose to honor. And he saw that this inner freedom, when consciously exercised, could make the difference between preserving one's humanity or crumbling into dehumanization. The same principle applies to the habit of postponing sleep. You have the freedom to choose your response to the emptiness you feel. You can continue to run from it through superficial distractions, or you can confront it honestly and begin to build a more meaningful life. This freedom is both terrifying and liberating, because it means you can no longer fully blame your circumstances, your childhood, your biology, or any other external factor. You have responsibility for how you respond to what life places before you. Frankl emphasized that human freedom doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's always responsible freedom. Freedom to respond to the demands of each situation in a way that honors one's deepest values. This understanding of responsible freedom leads us to one of Frankl's most original contributions, the idea that each person has a unique and irreplaceable task in life, a meaning that only they can fulfill. There's no competition in this realm because no one else can live your life for you. No one else is in your specific position with your specific capabilities facing your specific circumstances. This means you have an existential responsibility that cannot be delegated or avoided, to discover what life is asking of you right now and to respond to it to the best of your ability. Frankl used to ask his patients, if you could send a message to yourself 10 or 20 years in the future, what would you want to hear about how you lived this period of your life? This question flips the usual perspective. Instead of looking back, trying to understand your wounds and traumas, you look from the future to the present and ask what that future version of you would want you to have done with the opportunities you have now. And when you ask this question honestly, the answer is hardly ever that you wish you'd spent more nights scrolling social media or binge-watching shows you don't even really care about. The answer is likely about relationships you could have deepened, projects you could have completed, skills you could have developed, contributions you could have made, courage you could have shown in the face of your fears. And the reason you postpone sleep is that sleeping means waking up to the next day, and waking up to the next day means confronting the gap between who you are now and who you could become, between the life you're living and the life you know you should be living. But Frankl wasn't a simplistic moralizer who blamed people for their suffering or shortcomings. He had profound compassion for the genuine difficulty of finding meaning in a society that no longer offers ready-made narratives and constantly pushes you toward conformity or consumerism. He recognized that existential emptiness isn't an individual fault. It's a broad social phenomenon resulting from secularization, community fragmentation, and the loss of traditions that once automatically imbued lives with meaning. Yet, at the same time, he insisted that acknowledging social causes doesn't absolve each person of their individual responsibility to seek their own meaning. No one can do it for you. No therapist, no guru, no system can give you a ready-made meaning that works. They can point in directions, offer tools, but the discovery of meaning is inevitably personal and non-transferable. And that is perhaps the most difficult and most liberating truth. You are alone in the task of giving meaning to your life, but at the same time, connected to all of humanity through this shared search for significance. When you finally confront the void you've been avoiding through sleep procrastination, when you sit in the quiet of the night and let the difficult questions emerge without running from them, you are doing something profoundly courageous and human. You are exercising your uniquely human freedom to question your own existence. And that questioning, however uncomfortable, is the necessary first step toward building a more authentic and meaningful life. So, what can you do concretely if you recognize this pattern in yourself? Frankl would say the approach shouldn't be to force yourself to sleep early through rigid discipline, but rather to work on building a life worth waking up for. Start small. Identify one thing you could do tomorrow that would have genuine value, not because it brings immediate pleasure, but because it contributes to something that matters. It could be as simple as calling someone you've been neglecting, spending half an hour on a creative project you've abandoned, learning something new you genuinely want to understand, or performing an anonymous act of kindness. The key is that this action needs to involve self-transcendence, stepping outside yourself and engaging with something larger. When you start building days that have small moments of genuine meaning, the night naturally becomes a period of necessary rest to renew your energy for the next day, not a terrifying void to be filled with distractions. At the same time, practice sitting with the discomfort of nighttime silence without immediately fleeing to stimuli. Turn off your phone half an hour before bed and simply be with your thoughts. Let existential questions arise, not as enemies to be defeated, but as guides trying to show you where your life needs more attention and authenticity. Write down what emerges, not to solve everything at once, but to honor the importance of these questions. And remember Frankl's central insight. You don't need to have all the answers. You just need to be willing to live the questions honestly, because it's in the sincere attempt to respond to the unique demands of your life that meaning progressively reveals itself. The transformation of this sleep procrastination pattern doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't happen through isolated willpower. It happens when you gradually reconstruct a life that has enough meaning to make waking up worthwhile, to make self-care make sense, to make preserving your energy purposeful. And this process of reconstruction is fundamentally a journey of courage. The courage to confront the void honestly, the courage to take responsibility for your own life even when circumstances are difficult, the courage to step out of comfortable conformity and seek authenticity even when it means temporary loneliness, the courage to love and create even knowing that everything is transient and you will eventually lose it all. Frankl witnessed in the concentration camps that human beings can endure almost any suffering if that suffering has meaning, but cannot endure even a comfortable life if it is fundamentally empty. And what your sleep procrastination pattern is telling you is precisely that. You can no longer tolerate futility, even if it comes disguised as comfort and endless entertainment. Something within you is asking for more, for depth, for genuine connection, for active participation in creating value in the world. Listen to that request, honor it, and start where you are with what you have, taking the next small but genuine step toward a life that is truly yours and truly valuable. The nighttime emptiness you feel is not your enemy, it is your most honest ally, trying to show you that you were made for more than the superficial life modern society sells as sufficient. If you have the courage to hear this message and act on it, even in small, imperfect ways, you are already on the path Frankl described as the deepest human fulfillment, transforming your life into a conscious and responsible response to the unique possibilities that only you can realize.